Hello team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prabh, and in this particular session we're going to discuss around 72 questions on CISM. The best part is that this video cover all the questions from all the domain of 4 domain of CISM, and that give you a comprehensive view about the CISM concepts. I also uploaded the domain wise videos in past, so with that video and this video can be a great combination for your CISM preparation. I'm sure after completion of this video, you get a great insight about the CISM topic. My name is Prabh Nair. For more information, do check my LinkedIn profile. If you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. Very interesting question. So what is the best method? See, when you go for CISM exam, you can see these keywords in a capital manner. Okay, now let me tell you the definition of best. Best is basically the choice. Let me give an example. Like we have two keywords which is frequently used in a CISM question bank. One is basically called as a most. Okay, most. And second word is basically we use the word called best. Okay, so let's take example. Most of the people go to Goa in December. So that is a population. It is not an opinion, but it is like a data we have. Okay, so that is basically called as a most. But best to visit Varkala, which is a hidden spot. So it is basically where I am giving my individual judgment. Understood? There's another keyword we basically use, which is called as a first. First is basically, you can say first is basically used in that case when the question talking about the process sequence and all. What is the first step? What is the step and all that? So first is used in the case of steps. Most is basically used which is completely there by the group of people. Best is basically used according to fixing the particular situation. Now here the question basically, if you read the question carefully, the question say what is the best method for ensuring senior management endorsement and assistance for information security initiatives. So whenever I used to read question, I always divide the entire question into the blocks. Understood? So it is always good to divide in the form of blocks. So let me explain you how. Now if you take example, it say the best method. Okay, so we have a first keyword called best method for ensuring senior management endorsement. Endorsement basically their approvals and all that. So that's second the keyword. And assistance for what? Assistance for information security initiatives. So option A, employ real world instances of successful security breach. If I think like a manager, explaining them about the real breaches and all that does not make sense. Senior management are not a technical people, so that is not a best way I can able to convey. That is make them more confused. So I am eliminating A. B, say conduct security awareness training. By conducting security awareness training to make them aware about importance of security toward the organization, but it will not give the visibility about why we are introducing. It is a good basically practice when you want to reduce the weakest link and you want to modify the behavior. And if you go by the option C, assess the company adherence to establish cybersecurity protocols. See, it is more about the gap assessment. Question saying that what is the best method for ensuring senior management endorsement assistance for information security initiatives. If you're able to link the security risk to the main objective of the business, I think that is the one of the successful metrics we have, because we always follow top-down approach. So anything which basically include the business term, they have a higher chance to get an approval from the senior management. So that is why I'm going with the answer D. So I know in the first question, it took me around 2 to 3 minutes, but I was just giving you visibility how to read question. We went with the D as a best option because that is the most reliable parameter by which you can able to get an approval from the management. So always remember, anything which is aligned with the business get approved from the management. Anything which is basically aligned with the business is the best answer in the CISM. So let's move to the next question bank. Next question. Very interesting question again. unexpected security breach has occurred after the recent verification of control measure. Which initial step is crucial for the information security manager to execute? Now, three keywords are there. It means breach is already occurred, which is a past tense. And this is occurred after the verification of a control measure. It means they have already implemented some controls. It means we have implemented the firewall, after that this breach is occurred. So what is the step is crucial. Crucial means critical for the information security manager. Reassess the objective of control. See, reassess the objective of a control makes sense, but here my question is why this breach happened even after implementation of a control. And A is only talking about what is the primary objective of the control, which take time. Second is formulate, enhance and more rigorous control measures. Definitely we can do, but until unless we don't know why this happened, we cannot able to enhance. Come on, there was an attack happen and we update the firewall. First let us know what is happened. According to that we can update the firewall. Third is reinstall the services. Fine, that is a quick action. But after that if breach occur then? So first do the root cause analysis. Understand why this happened, how this happened. So problem management is the most important activity we have. Until unless we don't do D, there's no point of going for A, B, C. That is why the answer is basically D for Delta. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay. When prioritizing resources or prioritizing resource protection and response measure, which of the following is the most critical basis for making an informed decision? Most is basically mean group. Okay, best is used to fix the situation, but most is basically use regularly. So option A, outcome of BI risk assessment makes sense because BI talk about what is critical and risk assessment talk about what is the impact, threat, vulnerability. Option B, allocation of a resource based on a historical data. What about the current data? Might be current data change the pattern. We cannot only take the decision based on a historical. It is good to have, but we also need to see the present information. Third is implementation of standardized protection protocol. But what is the assurance that by just using a standardized protocols, we can able to implement all the response measure? And D says frequency of scheduled risk assessment intervals. By just conducting a risk assessment will not give you the good insight. So the combination, we go for the answer called A for alpha, because whenever we basically implementing any control, it's directly aligned with the principle that risk assessment BI are the foundation for prioritizing a risk protection, resource protection and response action. Other option while is there, but for a centralized management of response, it comes from the BIA risk assessment, because BIA talk about what is important, what is not, and risk assessment is basically giving me the outcome of if this is unavailable, what is the impact from CIA perspective. Understood? The level of impact and the impact from the organization perspective, visibility we get from a risk assessment. Understood? That is why we basically went with the answer A for alpha. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Another interesting question. Now question says that in establishing severity criteria, the first keyword is basically severity criteria they mention. If you can see that, severity criteria for incident response. Okay, which attribute is most critical to ensure the severity levels are uniformly determined for a similar events? Okay, so question saying they want to establish severity criteria. Severity criteria is basically the parameter by which we categorize the incident. Okay, so they're saying that by establishing severity criteria, which is a present tense, which attribute out of following attribute to ensure the severity level uniformly determined for the similar event. It means uniform basically mean common across the similar event. Option A, the criteria must be adaptable to different type of incident. See, let me give you an example. Suppose we are working on the hospital. Okay, in the hospital we have defined anything which is a critical patient, we have to give attention, and non-critical patient we will give little attention. So this is the uniformity of the criteria. So any kind of patient come, we will organize into these two category only. There's no point, okay, according to the patient we change the criteria. No. So question say in establishing. So we are in a present tense. Okay. And they're saying that which attribute is most critical to ensure severity level uniform. Uniform mean common. Okay. Determined for a similar event. So option A, criteria must be adaptable to different type of incident. Does not make sense. We cannot change the criteria every time. Understood? We cannot change the criteria every time. And option B is called criteria should be consistent, clear, easy to understand, which makes sense. Option C, criteria should be detailed and cover comprehensive list of potential incident. Why the incident criteria should be added there? And option D is criteria must be approved by all stakeholders involved in the incident response process, which makes sense. But they can only approve if they approve something which is uninformed, then so D does not make sense. And we are in a present tense, and D will be only come once the criteria has been established. We're still in a stage of establishing. It means present tense. That is why the answer should be B for beta. The criteria should be consistent. It should be clear, easy to understand, because we're still in a present tense. We have not implemented. They say that, okay, what is a successful outcome of the good criteria is the criteria is approved by the stakeholder. In that case, D can be the answer. But still, we are in a present tense right now. That is why the B is the answer. So let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so question is, which aspect is most critical to ensure through monitoring and metrics activity within the scope of information security management? It means out of following which criteria we ensure that, okay, we need to involve in the monitoring process. Option A, comprehensive insurance policy are in place for information asset. See, comprehensive insurance policy are in place. That is one of the risk treatment, which is like risk transfer. So A is eliminated. Option B, information assets are adequately protected and risk level is acceptable. Yes, this can be the benchmark. This can be the criteria based on that we're doing a monitoring. Okay. Option C, regular training program are conducted for new technologies, but that is a criteria for monitoring the behavior of the people or modifying the behavior. And option D is that detailed documentation of incident response procedures available to external audit. That is more from an audit perspective. So the most important criteria we basically consider is when you're doing a monitoring is that the asset should be protected and risk level is acceptable. That's why if even you get a question in the exam, what is the best practice for monitoring? It should be continuous. It is not something done in the interval, because we don't know when the risk is basically exceed. Okay, let's move to the next question. Thank you. Another interesting question. When considering, again present tense, the practice of documenting and sharing lesson learned with stakeholder, okay, which outcome is most aligned with the primary purpose of this activity? Two keywords are there. Considering, it means present tense. Practice of documenting and sharing lesson learned with the stakeholder, which outcome is most aligned with the primary purpose of this activity? Always remember one thing. Lesson learned is the last phase of incident response or incident management process. Okay. Option A, to fulfill an obligation to report incident outcome to regulatory body, but that is not a primary purpose. That is not a primary purpose, because some regulatory want to report the breach, some doesn't. Option B, to provide historical record of security incident for compliance purpose, but that is not the end goal. Option C, ensure the stakeholders are informed about the detail of security breach. Why stakeholders should be aware about the detailed security? They don't have a time. And D is enhance security awareness and foster the culture of continuous improvement. Always remember one thing, any question talking about ultimate goal of lesson learned, the answer is improve the process. And that is why we were basically going with the answer D. By documenting everything, it is a case study for them so that they can apply the same case study in the future incidents. So option D is the most correct answer, as it encapsulates the dual purpose of increasing the security awareness among the stakeholder and serving as a foundation for ongoing improvement, directly reflecting the intent of lesson learned activity. Is it clear? Other options, while they may be benefit of documenting process, but do not capture the primary objective. That is why we basically went with the answer D for delta. Okay, let's move to the next question. Okay, next question. Which attribute best characterize the capability of an effective SIEM? Now, what is SIEM? See, suppose there is a firewall. Okay, here we have a switch. Okay, so we have a system A. We have a system B. And here we have a system C. Okay. Now there is a IP which is called as a 1.1.1.1.1, able to bypass the firewall. then it went to system A, attack system A, then it went to system B, attack B, they went to system C, attack C. Now, if you see the traditional solution, we have to go to each and every system, collect the log, or we have one server which is called as a log server. Log server basically maintain all the logs, but manually we need to convert the log, manually we need to review, which is a lot of efforts and required. So that is why nowadays what happened is we introduce one concept which is basically called as a data analytics plus automation plus we have a third part called as a log. So this combination approach is basically called as a SIEM. So now what happened if 1.1 IP was able to bypass the firewall and it basically went to A, B, C, it collect the logs in the SIEM server, it convert the log into the common format, correlate and provide the information in a more automated manner. So by this way, we can able to get a time to automatically respond to the incident as fast as possible. Now question says that best characterize the capability of the effective SIEM. Option 8, consolidate and correlate input from multiple systems to provide the comprehensive security posture, which makes sense. Option B, it reduce the amount of input data from multiple systems to simplify the security monitoring, which is not true. It required data. Option C is it autonomously resolve incidents or potential incidents without know. For that we need a SOAR. And option D, it solely archive security even for future and compliance auditing. That is one of the features. Okay. So D is basically part of A. That's why the answer is basically A for alpha. Okay. A for alpha. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Another interesting question. The question says, based on the understanding that well-crafted business case can demonstrate the cost effective of incident management and response, which of the following point best support gaining a senior management commitment? See, whenever we present any kind of a budget, solutions and everything, it should be backed and supported by business case, and business case demonstrate the value of that initiative. So tomorrow, if I want to convey the management on the firewall, so I will prepare the business case for the firewall. I want to convey management on training for my employees. So I have to convey with the hello business case. So you should be a very good subject matter expert when you're trying to convey the things in a business case. So option say A saying that effective incident management allow for reduction in the implementation of a control for all possible conditions, thereby offering a cost-effective risk management approach. Now question, if you read the statement carefully, they say based on the understanding well-crafted business case can demonstrate the cost-effective. Okay, so which of the following point best support? Out of following, which is best? Option A say effective incident management allow the reduction in the implementation of a control for all possible conditions, thereby offering a cost-effective risk management approach, which makes sense. Option B, incident management response required significant investment. If I go with this statement, but ensure the absolute prevention of security breach, my business case will be rejected. That is not a best way to convey. Option C, the primary goal of incident management is to eliminate the need for any other risk management strategy, which is wrong. Incident management is a function or sub-function of risk management. Option D, implementing a comprehensive incident management response solution will guarantee increased profit. It's not necessary, it will guarantee. You're giving a wrong statement here. It's a resolution will guarantee increased profit and business opportunity, which is not true. So answer is basically better than the other. A is basically make more sense, because if we have an effective incident management, we can allow the reduction of implementation of control, because it's not necessary for every asset we can have a control. If something happen with those assets and all that, we have a effective incident management process by which we try to reduce the impact, because the residual risk that is left, okay, risk which is left, if tomorrow any incident occur from that risk, with the help of effective incident management process, we can able to reduce the impact. So that is how we need to convey. That's the reason we basically went with the answer A for alpha. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. What is the best outcome of conducting audit on incident management and response plan? Three keywords are there: best, according to fixing the situation, outcome. It means now we're not talking about input, we're talking about what is the best outcome of audit. Okay, option A, audit confirm that all team members are adequately trained in incident response, which is not true, because it can talk about gaps also. Option B, audit offer an objective perspective on the completeness and functionality of the plan and ensure there's no significant gap in the process. Makes sense. Option C, audit primary focus on financial implication of incident management response, which is not true. And option D is audit, ensure that latest technology will be used in an incident management. It is not necessary that we only using a latest technology. So only option which is very close is basically B. Because when you're doing an audit, it check the completeness of the plan, it check the validity of the plan, it check the verification of the plan, and it also verify whether it met the business objective. That is the reason I'm going with the answer B for beta. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Another interesting question. Which of the following is the best resource for evaluating the strength and weakness of incident response plan? In this question, the scope is I want a practice by which I can able to evaluate the plan. So one exam tip, any question talking about what is the objective of testing the plan, what is the objective of preparedness test, what is the ultimate goal of testing the plan is to, answer should be always remember is update the plan, validate the plan. Okay. Now in this question also they say what is the best resource? Between out of following, which best resource or document can be used for evaluating the strength and weakness of incident response plan? Option A, MTD, to measure the efficiency of response actions. See, MTD achieve, not achieve, that doesn't give the visibility in the A. Just mention MTD to measure the efficiency of incident response plan. It doesn't give you any visibility. Option B, alignment of the plan with organization mission. Okay, the plan is aligned with the organization mission, goal and objective. But is it practically implemented? That we have to see. Option C is building and approval of incident response by senior management. Okay, if it's approved by the senior management, is it implemented on the operation level? Question talking about evaluating the strength and weakness. Question is not talking about incompleteness. Option D makes sense. D says documentation from the preparedness test to review actual performance and readiness. Because documentation from preparedness test directly demonstrate how the plan operate in the practice. It reveals the effectiveness of the procedure. It reveals the identification of gap. It reveals the communication flow. And more important, it also highlight if resources are educated and appropriately deployed during incident response. Okay, that is the reason we basically went with the answer D for Delta. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Which of the following is the most important factor to consider when establishing the severity hierarchy for information security incident? Three keywords are there. Following, establishing present tense, severity hierarchy, or you can say severe hierarchy of information security incident. So option A, degree of regulatory compliance associated with the incident. See, only incident which come with a regulatory does not make sense that we have to give attention. Because if you're creating an incident response plan, we talk about high severity, medium, low. This is the severity. Okay, so question says that factor to consider when establishing a severity. Okay, option B is, see, A is definitely required. Anything regulatory we need to give attention, but only regulatory does not make sense. Okay, option B say level of management support available for different type of incident. That is an outcome. This happen after incident occur. Option C, potential business impact for each type of incident. That makes sense. Okay, we received 3 incident tickets, so we have to see the urgency impact. Okay, urgency, how soon we need to give attention, impact is on the business, which makes sense. And option D is level of audit support available for different type of incident. But audit is basically the support function. It is not only the function. So most important part is when you're creating a severity criteria is the C. Okay, the potential business impact of each type of incident is the correct answer because it directly reflect the critical need to prioritize the incident based on the impact on the business operation. Other option, while relevant to incident management, but do not directly address the primary consideration. That is the reason we basically went with the answer C. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Another interesting question is, what is the most critical rationale? Rationale means reason for using a centralized monitoring tool or procedure to identify information security incident. Option A, save cost for the organization. Definitely there, but it depends what kind of a solution. Might be that solution is expensive. So that is not a criteria. Option B, ensure compliance with regulation, but compliance with regulation is not a primary criteria we consider. Option C, identify threat across diverse environment. Yes. See, if we have a SIM, let's take example of SIM as a centralized monitoring, and there is a firewall. Okay, so we have a system A, we have a system B, and we have a system C. So if we have a decentralized monitoring is we doing a monitoring limited to this host A, host B, and host C. So now what happened? There is an IP called 1.1.1.2. It was able to bypass the firewall. It went to A, it went to B, it went to C. So all this information is holistically we get in the SIM. So when we having a centralized monitoring, we have a better visibility. Okay. And If you have a decentralized monitoring, we limit it to each host, and we limit it to each host, and we're trying to understand the environment from that perspective. And option D is they're saying that analyze the risk, but that is an outcome. Question say most important reason for centralized. So answer is basically C for Charlie, to identify threat across a diverse environment effectively. Because when we having a patterns of attacks across the organization with the centralized monitoring, we get a more visibility. Okay, this IP is origin from firewall, it going to A, B, C. So it means this is the critical one. And that visibility we get when we having a centralized monitoring. That's why we basically went with the answer C. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Now question saying that how can lesson learned during an incident handling contribute most effectively to organizational security? 3 keywords are there. How can lesson learn during incident handling contribute? Okay, effectively. Option A, by mandating additional security training for all employees. It's not necessary for every incident we need to train people. So that is not a very important or most important thing. Option B, by improving both security practice and incident response process, makes sense because the most important outcome of lesson learn is what is the gap we identify so we can improve, so we can make sure next time it should not happen again. Option C is by leading to an increase in the security budget. See, security budget for advanced technology. See, by lesson learn, if you're increasing a budget, that is the last day in my company. So that is not a most important contribution. Option D is by necessitating a complete overhaul of existing security policy. Definitely makes sense, but security policy is one aspect of the governance. So that is not a most important contribution factor of the lesson learned. The most important contribution factor is improving both security practice and incident response process, because lesson learned give you idea, okay, what went wrong, what went right. So according to that, we can able to improve. Okay, that's the reason we basically went with the answer B for beta. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. So, next coffee shot. Prior to conducting a test of incident response plan, what must the security manager ensure? Now, if you read the keyword carefully, they say prior to conducting. It means before conducting. So what activity we have to do? Option A, that potential for disruption during testing is minimized and fallback arrangement are in place. See, before I discuss this particular process, okay, I want to give you one clarity is when we're doing a testing, we're doing a test to make sure the plan is accurate, plan is updated, whatever mentioned in the plan is work effectively. But sometimes what happen when we're doing a test, it can lead to some downtime also. So that is possible. So make sure when doing a test, we have to make sure all the downtime and everything should be limited. So that makes sense. Option B, that comprehensive report is prepared post-test to document the outcome. I repeat again that a comprehensive report is prepared post-test to document outcome. Definitely that is also required. But question saying that prior conducting, B is happen after. Option C, that all security team are trained on advanced testing technique, but that is an outcome. And option D is that the latest security testing tool are employed for maximum efficiency. That is true. But if I'm using a maximum efficiency, the tool and that tool lead to some downtime then. So prior to conduct any test of incident response plan, the most important part is we have to prepare a strategy in this way that, okay, the testing should be minimized and fallback arrangement are in place. Okay, if this particular fail, then it should be restored back to other things. Okay, because this option align with the essential preparatory step that security manager should take to minimize the risk and impact of disruption from a test and ensure there are fallback arrangement to restore the operation. So let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. Another interesting question. What is the most important factor in ensuring the success of incident response plan during an emergency situation? Option A, comprehensive testing of all aspects of IRP, which is true. When I'm doing a test, I have to make sure everything should be included. Option B, frequent updating of IRP to reflect the new technology. We're not limited to only new technology. We also have a process, we have a people. Option C, ensure that all employees are familiar with IRP. That is definitely required, no issues. Okay, but if I'm doing a test during that time, if person is not available, so that should not be the only criteria. Having a dedicated budget for IRP. Okay, even we have a dedicated budget, but people doesn't perform this effectively then. So the most important part is basically A. See, if you have a comprehensive testing, which cover everything, it is more give the better visibility. Okay, that is the reason we basically went with the A. See, B, technology is part of A. It cover comprehensive. employee family with IRP, that is covered in the comprehensive. Dedicated budget, if we don't have, we can't do the comprehensive. That is also true. But if we even have a dedicated budget and if it doesn't include the plan for testing, doesn't make sense. That is the reason we basically went with the A, because when we're doing a test, it should be comprehensive. It should cover everything. That is the reason we basically went with the answer A for alpha. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. Another interesting question. In order to understand the current state, what is the current state of incident response capability within the organization, which of the following method is the most comprehensive for the information security manager to employ? It means I want to see what is the current state of the incident response capability. So what is the method we use? Option A, conducting a survey among senior management, business manager, IT representative to gauge the past performance and perception of the incident management team. Makes sense. But just by survey, does it give you that visibility? They will always say right, wrong and all that. Option B, perform a self-assessment by the IMT. Again, establish criteria to understand the current state. Definitely they want to say they are best in that. Option C, engaging the external assessment or audit involve the interview, survey, simulation, other assessment technique, which makes sense. And option D, reviewing the historical incident response record and report for insight into the IMT effectiveness. Okay, historical data. What about the current data? So according to me, answer is basically C, because C covers B also and A also. And if the audit is done from external, okay, that can be more unbiased one, okay, and it give more visibility because they will do the test without any pressure and all that. So for me, the answer is basically C, because that is the most effective way to provide the accurate report. That's why the answer is basically C. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. Okay, the question saying that what is the most significant reason for presenting an incident management matrix, measure indicators based on KPI and KGI to senior management? Option A. So it means the question saying that, okay, why we need to present KPI and KGI? And when you're presenting a KPI, KGI, what is the biggest reason? So option A, to provide senior management with the base of justifying ongoing support and funding for incident management. Makes sense, no doubt. Option B, demonstrate the technical proficiency of incident management team to senior management. How can you explain the technical proficiency? Okay, option C is to comply with the industry standard for incident management reporting. Not for the industry standard, we basically do that. Sometimes it's not required. And option D is to facilitate the annual performance review of incident management team. We are not doing for increment here. So D is also removed. The most important part is by the KPI and KG and KRI, you're giving a visibility, you're giving a maturity of the incident management. And it is directly talk about the management approach. That's why the answer is basically A for alpha. Let me give an example. Before incident management team, we have a 70 incidents that close in every 20 days. Now, after having a good incident management team, we're able to close every incident in 2 days. So you're getting my point. So that is how we can get the things. So it directly addresses the purpose of presenting the incident management matrix and measure to senior management as a mean of securing the continuous backing and financial support. Tomorrow, after having a 6 months of incident management team, I have to convey them what is the best outcome of this team. Reduction of the incident reports. Reduction in the incident extensions. Okay, initially we used to close incident 10 days. Now we have a 4 days. Achieving is 2 days. So that is how we're presenting a matrix. That's the reason we basically went with the A for alpha. Okay, let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, what is the most important role of incident management matrix, measure and indicators in the organization incident management function? It been out of following, what is the most important role for incident management matrix? Option A, track the financial expenditure involved in managing incidents, but only financial is one of the metric, but financial is the only way we can able to drive the role of success and failure. It cannot be the parameter. Option B, determine the effectiveness efficiency of incident management process. Makes sense. Option C, to record the frequency of incidents occurring in the organization. And option D, identify the individual responsible for incident occurrence. But D talk about the role. C talk about a particular record. So C, D, A is basically part of the B, because by having a matrix, we can able to track the effectiveness. That's why the answer is basically B, because this basically directly, this align directly with the purpose of using matrix for assessing how well the incident management function is performing in terms of its effectiveness and efficiencies. Okay, that's the reason we basically went with the B for beta. Let's say example, we have an incident management function. So we can compare. Not when before incident management function we used to close incident 10 days, now we able to close in 2 days. we can able to save costs, we increase the profit. That how it works. That's the reason we basically went with the B. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so question is, which of the following outcome is the most significant indicator of an effective incident management and response in the organization? So out of following outcome, which is the most significant indicator? Option A, organization ability to effectively handle unexpected event that may disrupt business operation. Makes sense. Option B, availability of a large budget dedicated to incident management technology. It is not necessary if you have a great budget that can basically providing me a great visibility over the effectiveness. So B removed. Option C, the implementation of the most advanced security technologies for incident detection. Again, just having advanced security technologies cannot be the most important outcome for me to measure the incident management response in the organization. And option D, establishment of a separate incident management department within the organization. Just having a separate will not give that visibility. Okay, the most important part is how you handle the incidents and reduce the impact, because ultimate goal of the incident response function is to reduce the impact. So if you get any question in the exam, talk about what is the ultimate goal of incident management process, what is the primary objective of incident management process is reduce the impact. Okay, that's the reason we basically went with the answer A. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. It's a very good question. What is the most significant outcome ensure by monitoring and matrix activity within the scope of information security management? It means the question document out of following, which is the most important outcome which ensure monitoring matrix activity within the scope of information security management. Option A, ensure information assets are adequately protected, risk level are maintained within an acceptable level, which makes sense. Okay, when we're doing a monitoring, we have to make sure assets should get adequate protections, and when you're creating a matrix and all that, we have to make sure our critical assets should be adequately protected. Any deviation, we can respond to them more faster manner, and risk can be remain within acceptable level. Option B, guaranteeing that organization market reputation remain unaffected by any potential security incidents. It doesn't give you guarantee. Okay, monitoring methods never give you guarantee. Option C, confirming that latest and most advanced security technology are employed. Okay, and option D is ensure that all employees are aware of the basic principle of information security, which cover one aspect. The most important part of doing a monitoring and defining a scope is to make sure whatever you add in the scope, it should be protect, and by that we can able to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. Okay, so that is the reason we basically went with the A as a answer, which is very close from the monitoring perspective. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. What is the most critical aspect of effective incident management? Option A, incidents are detected, record, managed to limit their impact, which we already discussed. Option B, provide continuous training to incident management staff on a new technology, but just providing a training will not give that visibility. Option C, investing in an advanced security system to prevent incident from occurring. You cannot prevent incidents. It will going to be happen. The ultimate goal is to reduce, because incident management itself is a corrective control. It means this will be activated after the incident is basically discovered. It means there is already a failure of preventive and detective control. Option D, maintain the extensive database of past incidents. By just having a past incidents, that cannot be the critical aspects. So the most important critical aspect of the effective incident management is detect, record, and manage. That's the reason we basically went with the A for alpha. So next question is, what is the most significant outcome of conducting a gap analysis in the context of incident response capability? I repeat again, what is the most significant outcome of conducting a gap analysis in the context of incident response capability? So from gap analysis perspective and the context of incident response capability, they're talking about the option. Okay. Option A, identifying the improvement in the process, skill, technology to bridge the gap between current and desired level, which makes sense. Option B, determine the financial cost of bridging the current incident response capability to the desired level, but only financial cost does not make sense. Option C, focus solely on upgrading the technology to match the latest security standard. No, we also have a process, we have a skill. And option D is evaluating the performance of incident response team against other organization. Why we have to go for other organization? Whenever in the exam talking about gap assessment, the ultimate goal is to assess the gap between current and desired state. Is that clear? That's the reason we basically went with the answer A for alpha, because A is basically gives the better visibility. Okay, because question say most significant outcome of conducting gap. By this we can able to improve my current process, my current skill, my technologies, and by this we can able to save cost. Let's move to the Acha, before we move to the next part, I want to share you some insight. Okay, whenever we start anything in the company, we first do the gap assessment. Always remember. Let me show you. Always remember, the first thing we basically do the gap assessment, because I've seen a lot of people struggle with this area. So first we have a gap assessment. Okay, then in that gap we identify the level of risk associated with the gap. So we deal with multiple impact. So which impact we need to prioritize, for that we do the BIA. So I want to start a cybersecurity strategy. I have to see what is the current and what is the desire. So we did the gap assessment first. Then in that gap, what is the level of risk we identify? And from that impact, we do the BIA to prioritize. So first gap assessment, then in the gap, what is the risk? And then how to prioritize the impact. So this process you need to remember. Second process you need to understand from the exam perspective is that, give me a second, is your sequence of governance. So first we always have a strategy. Then based on a strategy, we create a policy. Then we basically create a program. And then we basically talk about the SOP. So any kind of a security governance you want to introduce, first we need to introduce a strategy. Then strategy need to be implemented in the company. So with the help of policy, we need to convey. Based on that, we introduce a program, which talk about list of control, and then we have a SOP. Okay, so that's something you have to remember. Let's move to the next question. In the context of setting up priorities for information security initiative in incident response process, it means prioritize. Okay, what should be the most critical basis for this priority? It means which incident need to be response first, which issue need to be resolved first. So priority need to be set based on what factor? Option A, the area that offer the greatest potential impact and the best cost benefit ratio. Makes sense. Because whenever we prioritize the incident, we consider two factors: urgency to close, and if we don't, what is the impact. That is how we prioritize. Option B, the area that are easiest and quickest to implement, which is not true, because that doesn't having urgency. Option C is the initiatives that solely focus on latest technology trend, does not make sense. And the area required least amount of organization change. It's not necessary. The most important part, which incident being the greatest impact and can be able to handle with the cost benefit. So that is why the answer is basically A for alpha. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Okay. When selecting control for security program, what is the most critical element to consider during a program design and development phase? Keyword is design and development. Okay. And second keyword is control for selecting a program. When selecting a control for security program, what is the most critical element to consider during a program design and development? It means what we need to add, what we need to develop. Option A, overall cost of implementing, but we are not in an implementing stage. We are in a design and development. It means we are in a stage of control selections, control visibility. Option B, ease of integrating control with existing system, which is very important. Okay, in a worst case, or in a best case, we have integrated the control, but we need a visibility also, right? Option C, the recommendation of a control by industry expert. Definitely we remove. It's not necessary every control always come from an industry expert. And option D, where the controls can be effectively monitored and measured. Now in this question, we can see two options very close, D and B. Okay, rest two are eliminated. So we need to give attention to these two options. See, ease of integrating a control with the existing system. What about the new systems we have? There's also possibility. Even you integrate, if you don't have a monitoring, it doesn't make sense, because ultimate goal we have to monitor also whether it is achieving the defined goal or not. So B is there, but D is the most important thing. So when you're designing a development, I need a visibility of the controls. Until unless we don't have visibility, we cannot able to address the concerns. Controls were introduced to address the risk. If you don't able to monitor the control and their effectiveness, does not make sense to integrate. So that is why the most important part when you're doing integration also, that can be able to monitor that or not. That is the most important criteria. That is the reason we basically went with the D as an answer. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay. The most critical aspect of effective security program encompassing the entire organization. It means what is the most critical aspect? Option A, procurement of more advanced technology, but we are limited only technology. available in the market. So it's not the only critical factor. Option B, the focus on developing a high specialized security skill among a select group of employees. But again, it talk about people. Option C, establishment of a separate security department with own budget and resource. Even we having a security department, and if it's separate, how we integrate that. Option D, design and planning, implementation, ongoing management of people, process, technology affecting all the facets of the security. That makes sense because it is correct answer, because it actually captures the essence of effective security program. Security program is a combination of people, process, technology and their integration. And they're emphasizing a holistic approach that include designing, planning, implementing in various component like functions and everything. That is the reason we basically went with the D as an answer. Okay. Let's move to the next question. What is the most fundamental purpose of employing metrics within the organization management strategy? It means when you're employing the metrics, what is the most fundamental factor? Option A, the metrics to provide decision support, enable informed management decision, makes sense. Option B, ensure compliance with regulatory. See, we introducing a metrics not for the regulatory requirement only. So B removed. Option C, track the performance of individual employee. If you're going to track individual employee, that is not a most fundamental aspects. To compare the organization performance with its competitor, not necessary. The most important part is a good metrics should be created in such a way that it could support your decision and able to take the management decision more faster. That's the reason answer is basically A. A metric should be meaningful. It should be well aligned with the business so that we can able to take effective decisions. Let's move to the next question. What is the most important objective of information security program? See, information security program include all the controls and everything. It's a charter. Okay. Question say important objective. Option A, implement the most advanced security technologies. As I said, program is not limited to only technology. Option B, to achieve complete elimination of all the security risk. That is a catchy word. We cannot eliminate all the risk. Option C, to ensure risk is managed appropriately, impact from the adverse event are kept within an acceptable limit, which makes sense. And option D, ensure compliance with all the international information security standards. See, program we are not introducing only for achieving a standard and everything. Ultimate goal, reduce the risk to an acceptable level. That is the reason we're going with the answer C for Charlie. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. In the process of managing an information security program, what is the first aspect that must be considered regarding a metrics? See, metrics are the way to track the program function. Okay. Option A, whether metrics are necessary to track and guide the program development at the project management and strategic level. Makes sense. Option B, the cost and resource required to develop and implement this metrics. See, metrics is only doesn't talk about the financial cost. Okay. Question say, in a process of managing information security program, what is the first aspect that must be considered regarding a metrics? It means metrics we're introducing to measure the success. Okay. So success only limited to the cost and resource does not make sense. Option C say that technology needed to accurately measure and report this metrics. Again, metrics are not limited to only technologies. And option D is frequency with which metrics should be reviewed. Again, that's from a validation perspective. So answer is basically called as A. Whether metrics are necessary to track and guide the program development at the project, at the management and strategy level. That is a minimum criteria when you're employing the metrics. That's the reason we went with the A. Let's move to the next question. The question is, what must an information security manager prioritize to effectively balance organizational security need and business objective? Two keywords are there, that how you prioritize so that we can able to effectively balance the security need and business objective. Option A, implementing the most stringent and comprehensive security control available. Option B, developing a security policy that are least restrictive and disruptive to business operation while still maintaining acceptable risk at an acceptable cost. Option C, focusing solely on minimizing the cost of security controls regardless of their impact on the business operation. Option D, prioritizing the business objective over the security control under all the circumstances. Okay, I repeat again. Option A, implementing a more stringent and comprehensive security control. Option B, developing a security policy that are least restricted and disruptive to business operation while still maintaining acceptable risk at the acceptable cost. Option C, focus solely on minimizing the cost of security control regardless of the impact on business operation. And option D is prioritizing the business objective over the security control under all the circumstances. Now, questions say that what how to prioritize. Okay, so if you go by option A, most engine and compliance security control never be a solution because it impact the functionality. Just imagine you convey the manual for firewall, and after installing a firewall, it impact the traffic. So A, removed. Option B, developing a security policy that least restrictive and disruptive to business operation and maintain the risk. And that is something called as a balance of risk and benefit, right? Third, focus on solely on minimizing cost of security control. See, regardless of impact, even you reduce the cost and tomorrow if any breach happen, then it doesn't give you any business objective. And these prioritize the business objective over security control, it reverse. Okay, so it's not always possible. So only option which is very close is basically B. Introduce a policy with the least restrictive and balance the business need and business objective. That's the reason we basically went with the B as an answer. Let's move to the next question. In the context of release management, what must the information security manager ensure to reduce the chance of operation failure? See, release management goal is to release the patches, codes and everything. And ultimate goal is to make sure whatever the release happen, it should be happen with a limited impact. Because when you're deploying patches and all that, we demand some downtime. Sometimes patch get corrupt and that lead to corruption of the system also. So question say, in the context of release, what must the information security manager to ensure the chance of operation failure? Option A, that all new software devices are most technically advanced available, but that doesn't give you assurance that, okay, there's no failure. Option B, that proper standard procedure in place to prevent premature deployment of product to the production, which makes sense. If you have a standard procedure with testing and everything, with that, if you release a patch or release anything, it will have a limited impact. Option C, the cost of new software and system is within the budget. Even you have a budget for that, and if during a deployment, if it failed, then. Option D, that every staff member is trained on a new software, but that is after deployment, right? New software, device, system before deployment does not make sense. So most important part is basically B. If you have a standard procedure by which we test, validate, and then we deploy, then it makes sense. Second thing is that whenever there is a complex architecture, the patches and release should be deployed in a phases. Okay. Please note on that point. So let's move to the next coffee shot. What is the most significant factor leading to security breaches in the information system? I repeat again, what is the most significant factor leading to security breach in the information system? Option A, incorrect configuration of the system. Makes sense. Configuration is an important benchmark for any company. Configuration is a heart of any system infrastructure. If your system running with a different configuration, we need to allocate resource according to that only. Okay. Option B, absence of regular security training for employees. Okay, I provide the training to the employees. Okay, after that also there is a possibility of breach because training is only improving the behavior. Option C, lack of advanced security technologies. Makes sense. But even we have a technology, we have a breach. Option D is inadequate budget allocation for information security. Even we have a budget, still breaches is there. See, when we running with the multiple configurations and it is not appropriately configured, okay, so tomorrow attacker can find the opportunity in one of the configuration and by which he tried to hack. Even in that case, if we have a security technologies, we have a budget, still things will be happen. So to save cost and balance the security, we need to have a common configuration uniformity. And by that you can able to balance the security also. That is the reason we basically went with the A as the answer. Because when we're having a uniformity of a configuration, it is easy to manage. With a limited budget, you can manage the things. Technology can able to monitor the things. And training is basically the next level we have. That is the reason we basically went with the A as the answer. So next question is, in the context of adapting to changes in the environment, business and risk, what is the most crucial aspect for an information security program to integrate into the organization daily operation? If you read the keyword carefully, it says that in the context of adapting to changes in the environment, business and risk, what is the most crucial aspect for information security program to integrate into the organization daily operation? So they talk about changes, they talk about managing risk and business. Option A, ensure that all IT changes within the organization are solely managed by the information security, which is not true. We have an IT team also. Option B, identifying where IT changes are initiated, funded, deployed in the organization, integrate policy compliance into the process. But this is more governance, but also true, Because if you start from top-down approach of policy, it makes sense. Option C, require that all new systems and devices undergo extensive security tests beyond industry standards. Doesn't make sense. It's not necessary we do tests based on a security industry standard. And option D is mandating that all employees receive advanced training in information security before initiating any change. Just by providing training, you cannot address the changes in the environment, business and risk. So D, at least we eliminate, and A, we eliminate. So we left with B and C. B say identify where IT changes are initiated, funded, deployed in the organization and integrate policy compliance into the process. Because if you go by the policy, you can able to bring the uniformity, which makes sense. Okay. On the other side, C say only from test. So C is part of the B. Funded can be approval also. That is the reason we basically going with the B as an answer. So identifying whether IT changes are initiated, which is process, funded, deployed in the organization. And we also need to make sure they are integrated with the policy compliance. So if we have a policy compliance, it gives the better visibility. That is the reason we basically went with the B as an answer. Next, to ensure effectiveness in managing information security risk or managing security risk, what must the information security department do in relation to other organization assurance function? I repeat again, to ensure effectiveness in managing security risk, what must the information security department do in relation to the organization assurance function? So they're looking for a managing security holistically. Option A, provide defined interface, establish clear channel of communication between security related function and other assurance function, which makes sense because it helps you to set the expectation clear and it also provides the transparency. Option B, outsource all security related function to specialized external organization for improving efficiency. It does not make sense. Just outsourcing does not make sense. Option C, focus exclusively on technological aspect, separate from the organization broader risk management activity. If you keep the technology aspect separate from organization, then the things will happen in silos. We need to invest more money on that. And option D, develop entirely independent security protocol that do not interact with organization function. Again, it is a silos process. So only option which makes sense is if we want to manage security from the holistic perspective is clear communication channel. That is why we basically going with the A. Providing that interface and establish the clear channel of communication between the security related function and other assurance function is the correct answer, because this choice align with the necessity of integrating information security risk management activity with those of an organization risk manager and ensure that security functions like BCP, incident response can be integrated together and it can able to offer the better visibility. Live example, if you notice, is change management process security function is there, in an incident management process security function is there. So when you having such kind of a transparency and integration, you can have a better holistic view. That is the reason we went with the A as answer. Let me move to the next question. Very important question, can be relate in the exam. Which of the following is the test recovery team acting out a disaster scenario without activating processing in the recovery site? Okay. It means we do the test of the plan just to check whether the plan is pass or fail. Suppose I am the incident responder. I created a plan. I am a BCP coordinator. I create a plan. In my absence, someone can follow the plan blindly and execute. That is my goal. And make sure the plan is effective. We do the test to check whether it's pass or fail. So we have a different type of test. So here the option A talking about checklist review. See, checklist review is a preliminary step to a real test. So we have a checklist, recovery checklist, which is distributed to all the members of a recovery team to review the checklist is current or not. So it is not something act like a disaster scenario. It's just like distributing a checklist in the team member and see, do you find any gap in the plan, and update your respective department areas in the plan and all that. Prabh, in my team, this guy left, so please update this number. So this is how the checklist we validate. And it is a first step of doing a test. Second is structure walkthrough. See, structure walkthrough where the team member physically implement the plan on papers and review each step to assess the effectiveness and identify enhancement, constraints and deficiency. Again, it is on a paper. Third is basically called as simulation. Once we done on the paper, then we do simulation where the recovery team will have a role play which prepare the disaster scenario without activating processing at the recovery side. Hey guys, we have checked the plan. Now just imagine you are a system administrator, you are a database administrator. In the case of disaster, how you activate. So here we have a role play exercise. We are not going to the alternate site. Within the same location, within the same room, we are doing the role play exercise to see whether people understood the plan or not. But parallel test is basically we go to the alternate site. The best site to test is hot site. Question says that recovery team acting out disaster scenario without activate the processing in the recovery, which is a DR site, alternate site. So only option left is C for Charlie, simulation, which we're doing within the primary site within a one confined room with a role play exercise. Okay, let's move to the next question. Which of the following tests review each steps to assess its effectiveness and identify enhancement, constraint, deficiency? So D removed, C removed. We left with A and B. Checklist is only check the checklist, but structure walkthrough is basically verify all the document details and everything. That is the reason I'm going with the B as answer. Okay, we already discussed that. That's the reason I went fast, because in parallel we go to alternate site. Full interruption is basically happening in the production site after testing a parallel test. Structure walkthrough, checklist reviews left. Checklist is only check the checklist. Once the checklist is accurate, then the paper, whatever we have prepared, we test to verify the effectiveness. So here what happened is in the what you called structure walkthrough, they will physically implement the plan on paper and review each steps. Okay, after updating a checklist, let's do this activity where they will enhance the plan, check the effectiveness and your constraint plans and everything deficiency. That's the reason we basically went with the B as our answer. Once we done the structure walkthrough, then we do the then we do the parallel test. We go to alternate site. We try to restore the operation from primary to secondary. And once we find, then we do one time full interruption test annually on the parent side where we notify customers and everything. So that is how the sequence works. Okay, let's move to the next question. Very interesting question. In relation to the full interruption test for disaster recovery and business continuity plan, what must be done at minimum? It means what is the frequency? See, as I said, we have a primary site and this is basically my DR site. The best site for test is hot site because it is identical to your primary site. So when we're doing a parallel test basically, we basically go to the hot site and we will see, can we able to move operation to the alternate site within a defined MTD or RTO. So that is the thing. But full interruption is basically we do on the production site. Okay, full interruption, if you're not doing effectively, it impact the availability. The questions say that in relation to the full interruption test for disaster recovery and business continuity plan, what must be done at minimum? Option A, perform full interruption test annually only after each individual plan has been tested separately, showed satisfactory result, which makes sense. Option B, conduct full interruption test monthly regardless of outcome. No, we will not do full interruption test monthly. It will have a big impact. Option C, execute full interruption test biannually and combining them with the regular system upgrades. No, it will impact the availability. Option D, implement full interruption test only once every 5 years. See, once 5 years doesn't make sense. In every 1 year, it makes sense. So answer is basically A for alpha. That's the reason we're going with the A for alpha. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Okay, so next coffee shot is information security manager must design defense strategy against web application attack. Which of the following vulnerability must be addressed to prevent attacker from exploiting a cross-site scripting flaw? It's a very interesting question. I know in CISM, there will be some question on application security testable. And that is the reason, from the syllabus perspective, I added this question in this video. Because some questions can be tested on application security. And if you take an example of SQL injection or cross-site scripting, these are basically exploited through some input validation. So for that clarity purpose, I thought let me add this question in this question bank. So before we move to the options, let me first explain you what is cross-site scripting. Okay, so let's take example. There is a website. This is the website we have. Okay, and website is Reddit. Suppose we have a user and here we have a hacker. What hacker did, hacker basically post one content on Reddit. Reddit is a forum, same like we have a forum website. But instead of posting something like a content, he posts a script. Script is like this way. Okay. So if Reddit, it's vulnerable for input validation. Now what is input validation? It means accepting without verifying. Simply now I ask you 1 plus 1. So without thinking you said 3. I said okay, yes. So here without verifying you said 3, and I also without verifying I said yes. So that is a lack of input validation. Otherwise what happen if you have input validation on the page login, it will be like this way. So we have a username, we have a password. Now username, they say 8 character username, and password is minimum 8 character alphanumeric. If I only enter alpha, it will not accept the entry. It will say invalid value, or it doesn't meet the password requirement. That is called input validation. But here what happened, I post this particular script and Reddit successfully accept the script without any issues. So now what happened, the script is now published on a web page. Now this user basically visit the website, the page is loaded on his browser. He click on that pop-up, the request sent to Reddit. Without verifying, Reddit process back the script on the user browser, and user basically face that attack. What do you think? Will you visit the website again? Definitely no. This is what is called as a cross-site scripting. But if I put proper input validation on the Reddit page, if I put proper validation on the client side, so before he click, it will pop up. This is basically scripted issues or something like that. So by this way, we can able to block that. This is called input validation. So question talking about an application security manager design a defense strategy against a web application attack. Which of the following vulnerability must be addressed to prevent attacker from exploiting a cross-site scripting flaw? Option A, weakness in the authentication protocol within the web application layer, but this is basically used to address the buffer, this called brute force attack. Okay. Option B is implicit trust relationship that are assumed without proper verification in the web application. This is more from a domain mapping. Option C is deficiency in cryptography, SSL implementations, and the use of a short encryption key, and this is more from a data in transit. And D is inadequate input validation control that failed to filter out malicious script. That is the right answer, because by having a proper input validation, you can able to block such kind of an attacks. Understood? So let's move to the next coffee shot. It's a very good question. Enterprise risk assessment team has discovered a vulnerability that could potentially allow brute force attack. Now those who are not aware about brute force attack, what is that is, we have a tool with generating a random password, random username, and they try to place on the server and see whether it works or not. Suppose someone trying to hack my account. So the tool is there with generating a random password which is going to be placed on the password page, and by that they try to hack my account. If any password match, they can hack. In determining the response to this finding, the information security manager must consider various factors. Fine. Which of the following would most likely justify the decision not to take an immediate action? It means they want to go for risk acceptance. Option A, existing control are already adequate to mitigate the risk of vulnerability. In the question, they're not talking about any control. They just say they discovered a vulnerability. So A is eliminate. That is not a reason that we don't take immediate action. Option B, implementation of a necessary countermeasure present excessive complexity. It is more from mitigation, but question is not talking about anything control measure. Option C, projected cost of countermeasure exceed the estimated impact and value at risk. This makes sense because when the cost of countermeasure exceed the value, we basically accept the risk and continue the business. And D say there is a insufficient data to determine the probability. It's already their data. They already said brute force attack is there and it has an impact. So D is eliminate. So only close option is basically C. Always remember one thing, whenever the cost of countermeasure exceed the value, in that case we accept the risk. Okay, it's better to continue the business. Okay, that is the reason we basically went with the C as our answer. Now let's move to the next coffee shot. In the initial phase of conducting a risk assessment, information security manager must accurately perform which of the following tasks? Very, very good question. Question talking about sequence. Okay. And keyword is must, which is mandatory. Must follow. Option A, assess the performance level of information system assets. Definitely when I'm doing a risk assessment, because if you go by the risk assessment, the first step in the risk assessment is risk identification. Then we have a risk analysis. In the risk identification, we have a step called identification of asset, identification of the threat, identification of the vulnerability. Then we basically calculate the risk, and then we basically treat the risk. Okay. Question says conducting a risk assessment, an information security manager must accurately perform which of the following? Option A, assess the performance level of information system assets. That makes sense. Second is locate and inventory all the information asset and ascertain their relative or approximate business value. See, it's very important to know the value. Until we don't know the value, we cannot be able to calculate the impact. Implement the baseline security control. This is more like a risk treatment. And D, say determine the insurance premium for the replacement of information asset. This is more from a risk transfer. The only close option is basically B. The reason why is that in order to assess the performance level of asset, I need to know the inventory first. Until unless I don't know the inventory and value, I cannot go for assessment of the performance level. That is the reason we're going with the answer B. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. In the initial stage of risk identification process, what is the first action information security manager should take? Again, it's a very good question. Develop the detailed risk mitigation plan for potential risks, but this is basically come after risk evaluation. So A removed. Establish a risk register document, identify risk and the component. Makes sense. Implement immediate control for all the identified risk. Again, the question talking about first step, and C is basically more like a D step or risk treatment step. D, train all employees on the potential impact of identify risk. This is something we do after treatment of the risk. So only close option is B. Remember one thing from exam perspective, risk register start from a risk identification. When we identify possible threat, vulnerability and asset, from that stage itself, we basically maintain the risk register, and it is a live document which maintain the list of identified risk. Okay, so risk register start from risk identification phase. Remember that. Okay, that's why the answer is basically B. Let's move to the next question. When establishing a risk management program, what is the primary purpose of creating a risk register for information security manager? Now, primary is the outcome. Okay. Option A, to allocate the annual budget of information security department. Never. The allocation of annual budget is a task that stems from a risk management process, but it is not a primary purpose of risk register. Option B, to act as a central repository for all the information security risk, including a specific threat, vulnerability, exposure, and affected asset, which makes sense. Okay, because it is a centralized document which maintain everything, and we maintain this till the risk mitigation, acceptance transfer, and all that. Option C, to document the resolution mitigation strategy for all identified risks. Not necessary. Okay, risk register will eventually include mitigation strategy, but the first purpose is not to document the resolution, but to capture, record the risk. And option D is to serve as a communication plan for stakeholder during a security incident, but that is again an outcome. Okay, that is not a primary thing. Okay, and risk register does not include stakeholder information. So that is why we have removed D. So only close option is basically B. Act as a central repository for all the information security risk, including a specific threat, vulnerability, exposure, and affected assets. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, interesting question. When conducting a quantitative, if you read the keyword, it starts with quantitative. Okay, quantitative. So we have a two way to analyze the risk, quantitative way and qualitative way. But they're saying conducting a quantitative risk analysis. What is the most important aspect of information security manager must estimate to determine the potential loss? Okay. Option A, assess the impact of potential disclosure of data, which makes sense, but this is impact can be done in a way of qualitative also, quantitative also. A doesn't talk about specific thing. Okay. Okay, while productivity loss are there or other impact is there, but that is not the primary thing. Option B, assess the impact of potential alteration of data. That is only talk about the integrity opposite. So we remove that. Option C say calculate the monetary value of information or asset at risk, which makes sense because if you want to perform quantitative way, which include your ALE, SLE, or when you're including a numbers like 1, 2, 3, if suppose let's take example, we have a server. Let's take example, we have a server here. Okay, so we have a server. Hacker is basically a threat and he discovered the vulnerability which is called as a weak password. So likelihood of this is basically 1 and impact is basically 5 because the reputation value is coming around $5,000. So we have a asset value. We know the monetary value. That is why we are able to calculate this. You're getting a point. So calculate the monetary value of information or asset at risk. So in quantitative risk analysis, initial and most crucial step to assign the numerical value to the asset, which is a fundamental to estimate the potential loss. And quantitative analysis predicted on the ability to express risk in a financial term, starting with the value of the assets. And that is the reason I'm going with the C, but D also say the measure the likelihood of each threat occurring. That is also possible in the case of qualitative also, quantitative also. The only reason I'm going with the C, because question specifically talking about the quantitative risk analysis, where without numbers you can't do that. That is the reason we went with the C as a Charlie. Let's move to the next question. During which phase of a risk management process, information security manager must take decision concerning different risk treatment and prioritizing of the treatment actions? It's a very good question. Risk identification, where we identify threat, vulnerability. Risk mitigation is one of the treatment. Risk monitoring we do after identifying. So only option left is risk evaluation. Risk evaluation is basically where the information security manager evaluate the risk impact with the appetite, capacity, tolerance, and according to that define the treatment. And then during a treatment we treat the risk. Treatment is not something we're doing any analysis. Treatment is an action plan. Okay. So if you go by the process, the first step is risk identification. Okay, risk identification. Then second step is basically called as a risk analysis. The third step is basically called as a sorry for the handwriting, risk treatment. And fourth is basically called as a risk, third is basically called as a risk evaluation. So what happens is during a risk identification, we identify threats, we identify vulnerability, we identify asset. During a risk analysis, we analyze the impact, qualitative and quantitative. During an evaluation, we analyze the impact and map with appetite, map with capacity, and map with the tolerance. And then we decide, okay, which impact is going above the capacity, above the appetite, and all that. And according to that, we give the action plan to risk treatment. Treat this as transfer, treat this as a mitigation, treat this as an acceptance. Okay, so risk treatment is an outcome. Evaluation is the one who directing a treatment, how to treat the risk. That is why the answer is basically B for beta. Okay, let's move to the next coffee shot. Thank you. When risk is assessed and found to align with the organization acceptable risk criteria, what treatment option must the information security prioritize? Now, to answer this question, I want to first explain you the concept of appetite. So here we have a concept called, this is basically my capacity. Okay. And this is basically my appetite. And this is basically called as a tolerance. You can say tolerance is a current level of risk which organization able to follow. That is basically called as a tolerance. Okay. Now, if I basically go by the logic, okay, so capacity is like your monthly salary. Suppose I have a monthly salary called $5,000. Okay, so I decided that I'm going to invest $2,000. Okay, $2,000 on my shares, and current investment in the share is basically 1,500. Okay, so if the risk is basically go beyond the appetite, still I can apply some control to bring the risk below the appetite. But if the risk is basically go beyond the capacity, in that case the only option is avoid. Now question says when risk is assessed and found to be aligned organization acceptable risk criteria, it means it already mentioned acceptable criteria. Okay, so what treatment option must the information security prioritize? Risk reduction is basically reducing the risk, but they already say align. Okay, risk sharing is basically risk transfer. Risk avoidance is basically applicable when the risk is beyond the capacity. We avoid the opportunity and drop the idea and discontinue the things. And risk acceptance is basically mean when the risk is below the appetite or within acceptable level. In this case, the risk that fall within the organization active risk criteria. So information security will prioritize the risk acceptance as a treatment option. This means that organization acknowledge the presence of the risk but decide to accept it without additional mitigation based on the assessment. That level of risk is tolerable within the risk appetite. That is the reason I'm going with the answer D for delta. Okay. Remember one thing, any risk beyond the capacity, we reject. We avoid that business. We avoid the opportunity that bring risk. But if the risk is basically below the appetite and we can able to control, in that case, we accept the risk and continue the business. Is it clear? Same like, right now, suppose ISACA exam cost coming in $100. So it's okay for you to pay $100. So you accept the risk and went for the exam. But on the other side, if ISACA exam become $1,000, your salary itself is $200. So you have to think twice. You will say, let me drop the idea because right now I cannot see much opportunity in that. And if I accept, then it is a big impact. So that is how it works. So let's move to the next question. An assessment of organization IT initiatives reveal that projects typically run over a budget or on a schedule by approximately 50%. Management tells the risk practitioner that variance of 55% is acceptable after review. This is the illustration of what? Now in this entire question, some percentage is there. Okay. Question say na, assessment of organization IT initiative reveal that project typically run over the budget. Okay. Scheduled by approximately 50%. But management tell the risk practitioner that variance of 55 is acceptable. So percentage parameter is there. So this is an illustration of what? This is not talking about outcome. This is a explanation. They're talking about what we illustrate this. So option A, risk acceptance. Okay, risk acceptance is the outcome. But the question is not talking about outcome. The question say what they explain here. Option B, risk transfer. It's not a risk transfer. Option C, mitigation. It's not a mitigation because mitigating is basically mean reducing risk and all that. But here the percentage is increased from 50 to 55. This is basically called as risk tolerance. That okay, I tolerate the risk to 55%. One thing always remember, when you work for startup, risk tolerance is basically very high for them because for them, they have nothing to lose. They have to make more and more business. On the other side, the established company's risk tolerance is very low. Before taking any step, they have to evaluate the market and everything because they know even their wrong move can impact the big market. Understood? So here they're talking about, okay, I'm 55% is okay to accept. So that is basically tolerance percentage. In the case, the question say that, okay, assessment of organization IT initiative reveal the project typically run over the budget. 50%, management tell the risk practitioner that variance 50% acceptable offer. So which kind of a treatment is that? Then answer is risk acceptance. Okay, they accept this tolerance value and they proceed with the business. Okay. So in this case, answer is basically D for delta. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following is a manner of a risk avoidance? Option A, install antivirus. It is more like a mitigation. Option B, purchase insurance. It is more like a risk transfer because we transfer the financial impact to third party. Third is exit the process that arise the risk. Makes sense because risk avoidance means we discontinue the business that bring risk to the company. And D say take no action. That is more like a risk acceptance. So answer is basically C for Charlie. Okay. So let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay. Enterprise security policy mandate the use of a password with minimum length of 8 characters. However, this policy is not applicable to two specific systems due to impeding upgrades and network withdrawals. If the enterprise has achieved an acceptable level of risk, what is the first procedure information security manager should ensure it is carried out? Understood? Now, if you read the statement carefully, two things are there. It say use of a password within a minimum 8 character, which is basically a part of a control function. And however, policy is not applicable to two specific systems. Okay, due to the impending upgrades and network administration. If the enterprise has achieved acceptable level of risk, okay, what is the first procedure information should carry out? Option A, verify that transfer risk has been minimized, but the question is not talking about transfer risk. They're talking about two systems which is deviated from a current password policy. Option B, confirm that control risk has been minimized. Again, question is not talking about any gap in the controls and all that. So option C say ensure the inherent risk has been minimized. Makes sense that we have to see. D say ascertain that residual risk is within the organization tolerance level. Until unless your residual risk is within the organization tolerance level within appetite, we can have exceptions. When exceptions are made to security policy, it is essential to ensure your residual risk remain after the control have been applied is within the organization defined risk tolerance. This means that remaining level of risk is acceptable to the organization and does not require further mitigation. That is the reason I'm going with the answer D for Delta. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Risk officer has recommended several controls such as firewall, antivirus to protect the enterprise information asset system. Which risk response has been taken here? Option risk transfer. If the question specifically talking about cyber insurance, financial transfer, then answer is basically A. Like we're transferring the impact to third party by taking a cyber insurance. Option B, risk mitigation, makes sense because firewall is a control, malware is a control. Option C, risk acceptance. It's not a risk acceptance. Risk acceptance means without implementing control, we're running the business. And risk avoidance is we discontinuing the business. So only close option is basically B for beta, risk mitigation. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Which of the following is the best approach for the information security manager to ensure effective risk management throughout the organization process? Question says that which of the following is the best approach for information security manager to ensure effective risk management throughout the organization process. So which process by which we can able to, or what is the best approach to integrate the risk management? That is the question talking about. So option A, integrate risk identification, analysis, evaluation, mitigation activity into the organization life cycle. It means integrating the risk management in the SDLC, change management, patch management. Makes sense. Option B, focus solely on risk identification at the beginning of project life cycle. Even you identify, further you don't evaluate and analyze, there's no point. Option C, defer all the risk management activity until the post implementation review. It become more expensive. And option D is conduct the risk evaluation only during an annual audit process, which is a time consuming and it also lead to a lot of issues. So good activity is integrate parallelly in all the process. This is the best approach, because if you have this approach, you can embed the risk management into every stage of life cycle, and this ensure the risks are continuously identified, analyzed, evaluated, and mitigated as a part of an organization ongoing operation. That is the reason I'm going with the answer A. That's why if you notice in the change management risk clause is there, incident management patch management risk clause is there. So that's the reason. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. What is the best outcome determined by the conducting a BIA in the development of BCP? Question is, what is the best outcome determined by conducting a BIA in the development of BCP? See, BIA is the most important component of BCP. BIA basically talk about what need to be recovered and how quickly we can recover. Based on a BIA only, we basically prepare the recovery strategy. We submit the recovery strategy to business for an approval, and then we create a DR plan. So BIA is the core important element of the BCP. So option A, establish the RTO for critical business function. Makes sense, because when you speak to the business team, every business, they want to give priority to their business first. So I scheduled the meeting with all the business team, understand their criticality. They said one business say that, okay, I'm okay to accept a downtime of 4 hours. Someone said I'm okay to accept downtime of 3 hours. So this is how from BI we got the visibility, which business is basically accepting what level of downtime. So according to that, I will plan my recovery strategy. Option B, calculate the annual budget for the information security department. It is not necessary BI only used for information security budget. So that is the reason we eliminating B. C says identifying the frequency of potential threat, but identifying only potential threat does not give any solution. We need to see how the threat is going to exploit the vulnerability and what is the further impact. And option D, determining the communication protocol during a business interruption or business disruption. So that is basically more about the procedure we do after BIA. So only option which helped me in BIA is establish the RTO. That is the reason we're going with the A. So establishing a RTO for a critical business function, because BI is the fundamental part of a BCP development, and it is primarily used to determine the RTO, which are the maximum acceptable length of time that business process can disrupt without causing irreparable harm to the business reason. That is the reason we went with the A for alpha. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Okay, so what is the best description of the ultimate goal of risk management strategy within the enterprise? Because sometime in the exam you get a questions which validate which is a true statement and all that. So question say the best ultimate goal. Option A, to eliminate all potential risk to the organization. See, risk elimination is not possible. So A is basically removed. Option B, to ensure zero disruption to organization activity. That is also not possible. Option basically C say to achieve the acceptable level of risk resulting in a tolerable level of disruption to the organization activity. That makes sense because ultimate goal of a risk management is to reduce the risk. Option D say transfer all the significant risk to third party vendor or partner. That is also makes sense, but that is more one of the treatment. So A is eliminate, D is eliminate. We left with B and C. To ensure zero disruption, that is also not possible. Ultimate goal of a risk management is to reduce the risk to an acceptable level so we can able to continue the business. That's the reason we went with the answer C for Charlie. Okay, let's move to the next question. Thank you. So what is the best approach to ensure effective and consistent management of risk across the enterprise? Okay, it's a best approach for effective and consistent management. Option A, information risk strategy should operate independently of other risk management activity to maintain unbiased assessment. See, first statement when they say risk strategy should be operate independently makes sense. Of other risk management activity, it make the things more silos. It become expensive. Option B, information risk strategy should be integrated with the other risk management activity in the organization for unified approach, which makes sense. That's why we are using ERM, Enterprise Risk Management. Option C, information risk strategy should prioritize technological risk above all the organization risk to the safeguard digital asset, which is not true. And option D is information risk strategy should focus exclusively on external threats to the organization. What about internal? Because as they pose a higher, it is not true. So it can be internal threat also. So only close option is basically B. If you integrate the risk within the process, it basically give you better visibility. That is the reason we went with the B as a answer. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. So next question is, which of the following best describe qualitative risk and assessment? See, if you get a question, which one is faster? Qualitative. Okay, but which one is basically slower is quantitative. Quantitative deal with monetary, money, numbers. Qualitative is based on high, low, and medium. So question say, which of the following best describe qualitative risk assessment? Option A, assigning a numeric value to risk based on the impact and likelihood, but that is the definition of quantitative. So A is eliminate. Option B, assign risk based on a statistical model, historical data. Again, it is a quantitative, so B is removed. Option C, evaluating risk based on expert judgment, subjective criteria, which makes sense. Option D, conduct in-depth analysis of vulnerability threat, but D is mostly done in both, in risk, qualitative also, quantitative also. So D eliminate, A eliminate, left with B and C. See, qualitative is more about assumption, more about experience. So let's say example, I am doing CISM. I'm doing CISM training. So during a CISM training, I can say domain 2 is important. Based on my experience, I can say because I've given the exam, I know how critical is domain 2. So here I'm using my experience, subjective criteria, and based on that, I'm taking a call. That is the reason I'm going with the answer C for Charlie. Evaluating risk based on the expert judgment and subjective criteria. Let's move to the next question. When conducting a qualitative risk analysis, which of the following method is most likely to yield the dependable result? I repeat again, when conducting a qualitative risk analysis, which of the following method is most likely to yield the dependable result? Option A, statistical analysis of historical data, but this is something we do in a quantitative, so A removed. Option B, likely scenario with threats and impact. Again, this is the subjective and judgment which used in the qualitative, so we can reserve the B. Penetration testing result, that is applicable in both qualitative and quantitative also, so C removed. Assigning numeric value to the risk based on impact and likelihood, this is the definition of the quantitative, but the question say qualitative, so only option left is B, because in a qualitative risk assessment, what we do, we create assumptions. If this happened, then this is the impact. Based on my experience, I'm saying the data center is down, it has a big impact. So it is all about if. That is the reason we basically went with the B. Let's move to the next question. In which stage of SDLC security must be considered? Always remember, security should introduce as early as possible. If you introduce later, it basically take time also and cost also. So here it say in which stage SDLC security must be introduced. Must is mandatory. Option A, function requirement. It become later because first we have initiation, then we have a function, then we have a design. Why should I wait till function? Option B, development. It become again more expensive. Third, design makes sense. but D also there, which is called initiation. Initiation basically mean when you're having a meeting with the customer, you understanding a requirement, you assuming the security requirement there itself. Then you go to the functional requirement where you document the security. And then during a design, you design the security. So security must be considered as early as possible, and initiation is the first phase of the SDLC. And that is the reason we went with the answer D. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, next is, what is the primary purpose of DMZ? DMZ in the network architecture. Before we discuss this option, let me explain DMZ. DMZ stand for demilitarized zone. We keep those systems in the DMZ which is a public facing. And the reason for introducing is, let's take example. We have a network. Okay, so we have a network. And in this network, we have 4 servers. So we have a server 1, we have a server 2, we have a server 3, and we have a server 4. This server is a web server. This is basically your another web server. This is your database, and this is basically your Active Directory. If I consider these 2 servers, according to that, I need to have very strong rules in the firewall. Firewall is a solution which protect my organization from external attacks. But if I put more restricted rules in the firewall, just like an airport second layer of security check, where they tell you to remove the belt, remove the laptop and all that, any traffic coming on this server will get impact. Because this website they have created in which they host their e-commerce business. And if website is basically load less, it take more time, we might lose a customer. So we got confused. If I consider these 2 servers, according to that, I need to have very restricted rules in the firewall. And if I consider these 2 servers, okay, I need to reduce some functionality in the firewall. So we get confused. And that is the reason we introduce a DMZ concept. We keep those systems in the DMZ, which is a public facing side. So here we have a web server, email server, FTP server, which is a public facing side. And before that we have a firewall. So now what happened, traffic coming from outside goes through this firewall. This firewall does a high level of filtering, which is also called packet filtering firewall, which inspect source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, and based on that it allow the traffic. It go to the respective server. From there it provide the traffic back, content back. And all the critical or sensitive server we keep in the another network, which is basically protected by the firewall. This is also called as a 3 subnet layer or a DMZ subnet function. So now whatever the external traffic is coming, it go to this point. In worst case, if he hack one of the server, from there he performing any kind of a new attack, this concept is called as a lateral movement. This firewall will basically block those attack. Okay, so we keep those systems in the DMZ, which is a public facing. Okay, now question say, what is the primary purpose of DMZ? Option A, to isolate internal network resource from external, which makes sense because DMZ is also act like a wall to protect my internal network. Okay. Option B, to improve network performance speed, which is not true because traffic has to go through 2 layer of firewall. Option C, to restrict access to sensitive data, which is true. And option D is to enforce network security policy, but it is a technical control, so D removed. C is part of A. So I'm going for that option which can cover all the options. That is the reason I'm going with the answer A for alpha. Okay, to isolate internal network resource from external threat. Okay, let's move to the next question. The question is, which of the following is responsible for managing revoking digital certificate in PKI? Now in cryptography, let's take example ISACA. Okay, ISACA. Okay, this is B, Prabh. So you're looking for a CISM training. Okay, you reach out to me and said, Prabh, I'm looking for CISM training. Your first question is, are you CISM certified? I provide the certificate. And that certificate you verified from ISACA. So between you and me, there is a one body which basically help you to build the trust. That is called ISACA. So in the information security, this called as a CA, Certificate Authority Server, which maintain the certificates keys. So question says that which of the following is responsible for managing revoking digital certificate in PKI? Okay, so option A, RA. Now what is RA? See, when you talk about RA is a registration authority. If you go for ISACA exam, And if you're going for exam center, there's a PSI who conduct your exams. PSI only help you to conduct the exam. So they do the initial level of verification. They will not decide whether you pass or fail. They only do the physical verification. So RA is just like that. RA was introduced to offload the work of CA. CA is just like your ISACA, okay, who issue final certificates. Same like PSI will collect your details, verifications and all that, and finally it hand over the detail to CA, ISACA. ISACA is the one who issue. So certificate authority is a server which distribute the keys, distribute the certificate. Third option is basically key escrow agent. Key escrow agent mean a third party which maintain the copy of the key. So example like we have a Prabh and we have a user. We have agreed on one key by which we encrypting, decrypting data. And tomorrow if this user exit, Prabh also lost the key. So we have a third party where we keep the key. If tomorrow you exit, still I will obtain the copy of the key by which I encrypt and decrypt the data. So key escrow agent means third party which maintain the copy of the key. And fourth is called certificate revocation list. So what happen, our browser maintain the list of certificate which is expired. Sometimes you notice you browsing some websites and all that, they say certificate expire and all that. So certificate revocation list is a list maintained by every client on his browser which talk about the list of certificate which is revoked. Okay, revoked can be many reasons. Certificate was expire, the CA was compromised, the user is no longer, subject is no longer. So CRL is the list of certificate numbers which is revoked, which is maintained by a browser. So D removed. Question say response of managing revoking certificate. So CA is the one which creating a certificate, generate the certificate and issue the certificate and revoke the certificate. All this function done by CA. That is the reason we went with the CA. RA is only offload the work. Okay, that is the only thing. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Which of the following is the key objective of vulnerability assessment? Before I move to this, I humble request you to see my playlist of CISM. In that I have covered some more cryptography questions. Okay, it's very important. In the description box it is there. Which of the following is the key objective of the vulnerability assessment? Option A, identifying potential threat to the organization assets. Option B, establishing incident response procedure. Definitely vulnerability assessment is never introduced for establishing incident response procedure. See, when you talk about VA, vulnerability assessment is a process which is closely work with the patch management process. This can be the exam question. So example like we have a system A and we have discovered the vulnerability in the system A like weak password, okay, some patches requirement. So that is a vulnerability we discovered. But exploiting a vulnerability, getting into system is the next level of aggressive test. So VA is only test, but exploiting the vulnerability, getting into system is the next level which is called PT. Okay, question say which of the following key objective vulnerability assessment? So option A, identifying potential threat to the organization asset, does not make sense. Option B, establish the incident response procedure, does not make sense. Evaluate the impact associated with the asset, that is a part of a risk management. Detect the flaw that could direct to asset compromise, makes sense. That is the definition of VA. And that is the reason I'm going with the answer D for Delta. Okay, but one thing you need to remember is alternate of VA has a negative concern. When you're doing aggressive VA and PT, it impacts the availability also. So evaluate the criticality of the system. Post vulnerability assessment result, we provide the report which including a countermeasures. And based on that, they have to take the further actions. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Thank you. Which of the following type of IDS is typically deployed as a network device and monitor the network traffic for suspicious activity? It's a very good question. Before we discuss this, let me first explain you IDS as a concept. See, when you're talking about IDS is a solution which is basically used to detect the intrusion. Okay, so we have a two type of IDS. One is called as a NIDS and one is basically called as a HIDS. Okay, one is called as a NIDS and one is called as a HIDS. So here we have a NIDS which I install on the border of the network. Okay, it is basically connect with the switch. we have a system A, we have a system B, we have a system C. Okay. So now what happened? There's a IP 1.1.1.1. It's a IP. It is a source IP. And destination is basically he targeting a IP. So traffic goes through the NIDS. NIDS can only monitor from where the traffic is coming to where the traffic is going, from which port is coming to which port is going. But what changes it introduce in a system A, that cannot be monitored by the NIDS. Understood? That cannot be monitored by the NIDS. So what kind of a changes need to be introduced in a system A? For that we need to install the HIDS, host based intrusion detection system. Understood? So IDS is only detect. It means if they found something suspicious, it will only detect, it will not drop. But if you want to drop with that IDS, you can install the IPS, or you can install other firewall. Okay, so IDS is clear. The question is how the IDS detect. So there's a two way to detect. One is basically based on a rule. You create a rule like source is any, destination is this, source port is any, destination port is that, detect. So that is called as a rule base. Second is basically called as a signature base. Signature base basically mean whenever they're sending a packet with signature, they check the signature of the traffic and compare again the database. If they found signature, malicious signature, they will detect. Third is called as an anomaly. Anomaly is more like a behavior. It means we're sending a 70,000 packet, which is look not generic, it's look suspicious. So anytime deviation traffic, suspicious traffic is basically detect and all that, it will detect that as an intrusion. Now question says that which of the following type of IDS is typically deployed as a network device and monitor the network traffic only. So host based IDS is only limited to the particular host. Network based IDS monitor the network level activity, makes sense. Signature based is a type of engine used in a NIDS HIDS. Anomaly is a type of engine used in NIDS HIDS for the signature analysis. So C and D removed. So only option left is NIDS. One more important thing, this is a firewall. If you place NIDS after the firewall, so firewall will basically block all the major attack based on a rule, and rest of the cream traffic get inspected by the NIDS. So if you place the NIDS after the firewall, you can able to inspect more genuine traffic. But if you install the NIDS before firewall, then all the traffic is coming on the NIDS, which generate a lot of noise. Understood? So when we're talking about IDS is basically have a two things. One is called sensor. Sensors are basically called as an NIDS HIDS, and second is called as an analysis engine. How they analyze. So they analyze based on a signature, they analyze based on anomaly, they analyze based on the rule. Question specifically talking about network device, monitor the network traffic. That is the reason we went with the answer B for beta, network based IDS. Okay, let's move to the next question. Who primarily lead the incident management team in the enterprise? I repeat, who primarily lead the incident management team in the enterprise? Option A, information security administrator, but this guy is more like an operation role. So A removed. B, CIO. CIO is accountable for overall information system. He's not the one who primarily lead. Option C, information security manager. He is the first contact point for any incident, and he is the one who lead incident management team. If any incident happen, incident management team first report this issue to information security manager only. So according to CISM, remember that information security manager is the one who lead this team. Application security is a part of an operational team. So D is removed. So only option left is C. Let's move to the next question. Thank you. What is the primary purpose of BIA? BIA stands for Business Impact Analysis. During a BCP plan, what is critical, what is not, determining the RTO and establishing MTD is done with the help of BIA. Because in the case of disaster, it is not possible for me to protect all the business on a same time with the same resources. So we need to prioritize which business we need to restore first and which business need to restore later. So according to that, we can create a recovery strategy. And to create that, we need to do the BIA, because BIA is all about what need to be recovered and how quickly we can recover. So option A, it helps the stakeholder understand what impact an incident could have on the business, which makes sense. That is a primary purpose. Option B, essential to understand structure and culture of the organization. That can be understood by multiple ways, survey, audit and everything. Option C, identify risks that are most important to the organization. That can be identified with the help of risk assessment also. And option D is optimize the recovery priority based on a system dependency. That is more from the CMI perspective. So only option very close to the question is A. It helps the stakeholder to understand what impact an incident could have on the business. That is the reason answer is basically A for alpha. Okay, next coffee shot. Aspirants Limited is planning to build an alternate site for e-commerce business services. Their primary requirement is to make the site with a maximum availability. Which site will you suggest most to implement? Now, in this perspective, we have a 4 type of sites or 5 type of sites. Depending upon BI, we finalize this site. So we have a first mirror site. Mirror site is like identical to the primary site. It has people, it has process, it has technology, everything. Okay, so let's take an example. We have a site 1. And we have a site 2. Site 1 and site 2. Site 1 basically having a people, process and technology and data. And site 2 is a mirror site which has a people, process, technology and data. Okay, so the site 1 is done. From site 2 we can continue. So that is called mirror site. Hot site is basically mean we have a people, we have a process, we have a technology. Okay. We need to move servers, or sometimes we have a servers, we don't have a data, which is basically called as a hot site. In warm site, we don't have a server. We have a rack panel, we have a power, we have a cables, we have a internet, we have a landline, we have a rack, server rack and all that, but we don't have a server. And cold side, we have nothing. We only have a power and water. Now question says aspirant is planning to build alternate e-commerce. E-commerce itself is critical. Their primary requirement is to make the site with a maximum availability. Hot site is active passive. Warm side is active passive, cold side is active passive. In hot side, we have a server, we don't have a data. Warm side, we have a rack, we don't have a server, we don't have a data. So it takes time to move server and data. Cold should have anything, so it takes more time. So if you're looking for the maximum availability, then answer is basically mirror site, because it offers the maximum availability. But one disadvantage is that it is very expensive. Okay. So that is the reason we went with the answer A for alpha. If you review my domain 4 coffee shots of CISM, you will get more details about this topic. Okay, let's move to the next question. Who will be in the best position to define the level of access and security for information for the business? System designer, but he is more from a SDLC perspective, who design the system. Data owner is the one who create and decide who can access, who cannot. Makes sense. Custodian, who manage the data on behalf of owner. And D is a simple user who access. So A and D removed. We left with B and C. Question say best position define the level of access. It is a data owner who instruct the data custodian who can access, who cannot. So that is why the answer is basically B for beta. Okay. B for beta. Let's move to the next question. What is the main goal of information security awareness and training in the enterprise? Option A, communicate what people responsible toward the security. Makes sense, because when we conducting awareness training, we make them aware, we make the employee aware about the responsibility toward the organization. During a breach, they were giving one dialogue is we were not aware about that, we should report this. Please note down this point. The best way to measure any awareness training is increase in the incident report and decrease in a security violation. Why? Post awareness training, people get more visibility. We need to report this also, we need to report that also. That is why post awareness training, if there's an increase in the incident report, it's a good thing. Okay, so communicate what people responsible towards the security. Makes sense. Option B, to prepare student for certification. That is not a awareness, that's a training. Option C, to comply with organization policy. For the sake of comply with the policy, we don't conduct the awareness training. D, inform people about new threat and issue. It's not possible to explain non-technical people about new threats. So answer is basically A, because with the help of awareness training, we make them aware about their responsibility toward the organization, responsibility of security toward the organization, and make them aware about how they can report the incidents. So if they're able to report incident as soon as possible, we can able to respond to the event as soon as possible. That is the reason we went with the answer A for alpha. But make a short note, the best way to measure the success of awareness training is increase in the incident report and decrease in a security violation. Because more incident they report, more visibility we get, and by which we can able to respond to the events immediately. Let's move to the next coffee shot. Another interesting question. Which of the following is the most secure mechanism by which you can secure a wireless network? For your information, all four options are the different type of authentication that we use in a wireless, okay? The first is WEP. WEP stands for Wired Equivalent Privacy. WEP offer the key size of 64-bit only. Okay, it is still secure. WPA offer 128-bit. So WPA definitely more secure than WEP. Shared key is a very generic which origin from WEP. So it is again a 64-bit. Password is a simple static value that you enter. Now, if I say password, so example like this is my system A, this is my system B, and this is my access point. Okay, so initially when in wireless, we introduce the authentication, we introduce a password based authentication. It means B have a password called KIT underscore 123 and A also have a password called KIT underscore 123. So if they enter same password KIT underscore 123, he sent to AP, he sent to AP. So attacker can able to predict. So to overcome that, we introduce a WEP. In WEP, we introduce a concept of IV. Now it is not testable, it is for a reference. So what happened now? KIT underscore 123, which is a password, act like a key. Plus in that, we add one more concept which is called IV. IV stand for initialization vector, which is used to randomize this value. It means now KIT underscore 123 plus IV value is 2147. Okay, he also have a KIT underscore 123. His IV value is 1278. So if the text is same called Prabh, and here also the text is same Prabh, but the output will be different because they're using KIT underscore 123 plus 2147, which is used to randomize the key. KIT underscore 123 127 it randomize the key. So even they encrypting a same text, the output will be different. That is what is offered in WEP. But the problem is that the overall key size was 64, which is easy to break. That's why to replace that, we introduce a WPA. Shared key is a static value, password is a static value, which is not secure. So only thing, the best way you can able to secure the wireless network is WPA. Okay. Now we have a more secure than that, which is called as a WPA2. Okay, or WPA3. But as per this current question, this is the best answer. Let's move to the next question. Which of the following is the best to create when managing complex solution and process? I'm doing out of following, which is basically a solution which is used to manage complex solution. Solution is operational technology. Okay. Just creating a policy will not help me to manage the complex solution because policy is administrative in nature. So A removed. Security architecture is definitely important because by this way you can able to integrate multi-technology solutions. So we can reserve B. C is the standard. Standard is anything. It's generic, which is used to measure the parameters and all that. Even you have a management sponsorship. How are you going to manage the solution? So management sponsorship is basically for the approval of budget or any kind of initiatives. So answer is basically security architecture because it is a solution which is used to integrate multi-solutions functions. That's why the answer is basically B for beta. Okay. Let's move to the next coffee shot. You join as a security manager in the organization. You are responsible for building a security policy for an organization to bring uniformity. What is the most essential thing to be contained in information security policy? See, whenever any kind of a thing we need to introduce in the organization, we first introduce a policy for that because policy is a foundation for any governance. Now let me explain you. So let's take example. We have a regulations like SOX. Okay. Then we have a GDPR. India, we have a RBI regulatory requirement. So senior management basically have a concern that, okay, the people, the process and technology which is happening on the operation, how we make them aware about this. Because here the goal of a senior management or the intention of senior management is that they should follow my SOX, GDPR, RBI, or they should follow my business requirement. So best thing is that we first create a policy. So policy basically shows the intention of the management. Policy basically shows the commitment of the management. So policy basically capture the SOX, GDPR regulatory requirement and enforce in the company as a form of law. So questions say that you join as a security manager in the organization, you're responsible building a security policy for organization to bring the uniformity. What is the most essential thing to contain in the policy? Option A, risk matrix. Risk matrix is basically good to have, but it is good to have in the risk management policy. Option B, security process. Definitely process required with the procedure. Because if you see the policy hierarchy, first we create a policy. Every system must be protect with the password. The password must be 8 character. That is basically a standard. How to create 8 character password? We have a procedure. So without standard, without procedure, policy is ineffective. Then we also have a baseline about, okay, what is the minimum criteria of securing a password? And then we have a guideline which is optional in nature. Okay, so security process is not part of a policy, so be removed. Option C, key objective of security program. Definitely, because if you go by the policy hierarchy, the first we create a strategy, then we talk about the policy, and policy basically talk about the security program, and based on security program we implement the function. So key objective of security program is covered in the policy. Effective roles and function we never define in the policy. So D is removed. So only option left is C for Charlie. Key objective of the security program should be covered in the policy, by which we can share the intention clear, and based on that we can introduce a program in the company. Is it clear? That is the reason we went with the C as an answer. Now let's move to the next question, which is another important part we have. Okay. What is the most important role of a senior management in supporting the information security in the enterprise? Option A, implement of the policy. See, they never implement actually. Policy basically created by the information security manager / CISO, and it is signed by the senior management. Okay. And then further implement by the security manager. So A, removed. Option B, approval of all the initiatives, which makes sense. They are the one who approve the budget. They are the one who approve the policy. They are the one who approve the business budget also. Option C, review the outcomes. Makes sense. But review the outcome can be done by other managers also. Conduct BI, that is not a role of a senior management. So high level sponsorship is basically approved always from the senior management. So that is why the answer is B for beta. Let's move to the next question. Okay, which of the following should be the first step an information security manager takes in developing the information security plan? 3 keywords are there. First, it means question document sequence. Second is developing present tense for the information security plan. Option A, perform a assessment of infrastructure. But what? Based on what parameter? Because if you go by the security governance, we always follow top-down approach. So A, removed. Option B, analyze the current business strategy. Definitely based on a business strategy only we create a plan. A good plan is the one which align with the strategy, which makes sense. Option C, undertake a comprehensive analysis to determine the potential business impact of various risks. Without understanding a business, there's no point of analyzing a various risk. D, say evaluate the existing awareness of security protocols and issues among the organization staff. Directly, there's no point of going to the operation level. So the first thing is basically analyze the current business strategy. That gives the better visibility. That's the reason we're going with the answer B for beta. Okay, let's move to the next question. And the reason for that is basically because we're following a top-down approach. Until unless we don't understand the business strategy, we cannot able to identify the risk. We cannot able to identify threats. We cannot able to finalize the procedures. So first we need to understand what is a business. According to that, we interpret the legal, regulatory, other factors. Next, what is the most critical factor for an information security manager to consider when developing an effective awareness and training program in the organizational environment? What is the most critical factor for the information security manager to consider when developing an effective awareness and training program in an organization environment? Option A, in-depth technical detail of later security threats, but that doesn't give the visibility. Not everyone will be familiar with the threats. Because keyword is saying most critical factor, and second is they're saying training awareness. Second is organization structure and culture as well as effective communication method. Definitely culture is basically the most important factor, how they perceive. Option C, personal preference of the senior management team. That's not possible. And D, say budget available for the security training and awareness program. That is also important, but if we have a budget and if we don't have a culture, does not make sense. So the most important is basically structure, culture and mode of communication. So B is basically the most important part. Yes. Let's move to the next question. In the process of evaluating a current security posture of organization, what is the best approach to also measure the current state of risk. Option A, perform a full risk assessment including threat, vulnerability, impact, which makes sense because that is how you can able to measure the current state of risk. B, say rely on the result of most recent security audit. What about that audit is not effective? Option C, focus exclusively on the most critical vulnerability identified by security team, but that is cover only one aspect. We also need to discuss what is the threat. And option D is consider only the threat have been realized in the past, but what about the present? And DCB is included in the A. By doing a full risk assessment, we get a holistic view of the visibility. That's the reason we went with the answer A for alpha. Let's move to the last question. Which of the following best define the matrix within the context of information security management? It means what is define the matrix here? Option A, quantifiable entity that allow measurement of achievement of process goals. Because when we introducing a matrix, it is used to track something and it's always in a numbers. So it makes sense. Option B is qualitative analysis that provide overview of security posture, which is very generic in nature. Option C, security tool that detect anomalies within the information system. That is a function of any security product. And option D is organization policy that dictate the security framework. That is more like a governance function. So only option which is basically makes sense to define the matrix is quantifiable entity, because if you have a numbers in place, it is easy for us to measure. That is the reason we're going with the answer A. So this is all from my side. Do let me know how do you find this entire CISM mock session. And do let me know, shall I make another set of questions for other certifications? And if you pass the exam with the help of this content, do share your suggestion in the comment box. Do share your success story in the LinkedIn and comment box. This is all from my side. If you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. Good day. Bye.